there, roommates. Welcome to the first episode of the newest show on the Roommate Review, Roommate Randomness. My name is Mike, and I will be your charming and likable host for the foreseeable future.
Oh god, what if I'm not charming and nobody likes me? I don't think I can deal with that kind of rejection. What would the people say? How would I look? What if I look like an idiot? Oh no, maybe I should think twice before going all in on this whole YouTube thing.
So what is Roommate Randomness? Well, Roommate Randomness is pretty well exactly what you think of when you hear the title. I, as a member of the Roommate Review, will be talking about whatever I want. Be it movies, television, books, all sorts of things. Anything that catches my interest will probably be an episode of Roommate Randomness at some point in time. Which brings us to today's episode. You see, given those specifications, I have been thinking painstakingly for the past year about what I would want my first video on the Roommate Review to be. I potentially thought about doing Let's Reviews for a bit, patent pending, but then I thought maybe I should do something a little more digestible, something that isn't a 12-hour run-through of a game. You know, just a nice little 10-20 minute video, a review of some kind maybe. But then what would I talk about? I'm interested in a lot of things. I could talk about a lot of things for a very long period of time. So I needed something big. I needed something that would grab people's attention and make them stop scrolling through their YouTube feed and go, hey, that looks like a really cool video. And I just couldn't come up with anything. It eluded me. I didn't know what would be a big enough video to elicit that reaction. And then one day it came to me. I was simply scrolling through my Facebook feed. You know how it goes. You're on the can. You don't have anything to do. You grab your phone and you just start scrolling. Who knows what you'll find? I didn't even get to the scrolling phase. No, I opened my Facebook app, and the very first thing I saw gave me my video. All it took was one simple sentence. For a total wuss pants with a hair product obsession and no end of mommy issues, Sephiroth had some damn fine theme music. So yeah, today we're gonna talk about Sephiroth. Now, obviously these comments are nothing new. Sephiroth makes himself an easy target. On the surface, he is merely a bland, monotone pretty boy who is only famous because he was the main antagonist of the game that is responsible for JRPGs becoming a cherished phenomenon and long-term staple in video gaming in the Western Hemisphere. If you dig though, just a little bit, you will soon realize that Sephiroth is actually one of the most fleshed out villains in Final Fantasy history. But we're not just going to scratch the surface to prove this point. No, my fellow roommates, today we look at Sephiroth's entire character arc, and we see just how deep, or shallow, he really is. So starting here, consider this your spoiler warning. If you have not played Final Fantasy VII and you want to experience it for yourself, go do so before watching this video. I will not censor anything, and as such, everything is fair game to be spoiled. If it's in any Final Fantasy VII title, except for like Dirge of Cerberus, but nobody cares about that anyway, then there is a chance that I will talk about it. You have been warned. So let's start things off by asking a couple basic questions. Like, who is Sephiroth? Well, Sephiroth is the legendary hero of the Wutai War, known for his superhuman-like abilities. At which point, I suppose the next obvious question would be, where did he get those abilities? But to answer that one, we need to cover a couple bases first. So let's just go back to the obvious beginning and start with the events that led to the birth of Sephiroth. Before we can jump right into Sephiroth, we need to talk about Shinra. To put it bluntly, Shinra is the mega corporation that controls society as it's known in the world of Final Fantasy VII. They are the sole proprietors of Mako Energy, the primary power source of the planet Gaia. Because of this, they control everything. They have the strongest military force, the greatest technological advancements, and quite frankly, they are the economy of the world. So what is Shinra's ultimate goal here? Well, to control more, obviously. Sure, they control all of the energy in the world. But what if they had more? What if they found a place where Mako flows limitlessly, like an ocean? Unlimited energy for them to sell to anyone who they could possibly think to sell to. Obviously, this would mean that they would be the dominant force of power and money in the world and would never be able to be topped. But does such a place exist? Well, according to a 2,000-year-old legend created by a race called the Cetra, or the Ancients as they're more commonly referred to in the current age, such a place does exist. The Ancients believed that if they traveled the planet cultivating the land, the end of their journey would bring them to the Promised Land, a place made of supreme happiness. Shinra, being the mega corporation it is, can obviously afford to grasp at straws like this, so they decide to start investing in research in an attempt to find the Promised Land. Their research was headed by Professor Gast, who would eventually unearth a creature sealed away in the northern crater. He would soon go on to confirm that this creature was indeed a Cetra and gave it the name Jenova. With this link to the Ancients, the Shinra research team began looking into creating a Cetra-human hybrid who would eventually grow up to lead them to the Promised Land. Try as they might, however, their experiments never developed someone capable of such a thing. However, while they did not succeed in creating an ancient human hybrid, they did begin to notice that the people they were injecting Jenova cells into were becoming stronger, to an inhuman degree. This naturally resulted in Shinra trying to produce more of these superhumans in an attempt to surpass their current super soldiers who were created by Mako infusion. Research continued on Jenova until Gast's assistants, Hojo and Lucrezia, began performing their own experiment. They called it Project S, and it resulted in Lucrezia becoming pregnant with Hojo's child, and Hojo injecting Jenova's cells directly into the embryo. Lucrezia went on to give birth to the child, who was taken away by Shinra before she could even get a chance to hold him. This baby would come to be known as Sephiroth. Now that we have all the backstory out of the way, I think it's about time we started talking about Sephiroth. The first thing I want to bring up is that Sephiroth didn't know any of the stuff that I just told you about. All he was told about himself was that his mother's name was Jenova. He wasn't even given info on who his father was. Beyond that, his childhood was pretty well just that of a soldier. By the age of 12, he had already become a soldier first class, the highest rank in Shinra's military service. Around the same time, the Wutai War had just started, which provided Sephiroth a chance to display how much of a monster he really was. He would immediately go on to become a well-decorated war hero, almost to the point of celebrityhood. In fact, you could even say he was a celebrity. Sephiroth would go on to inspire hundreds, if not thousands of children to join Soldier in the hopes of becoming Shinra's next big hero. And that's about all that's known about the Wutai War. Anything else that's known really doesn't affect Sephiroth at all, so we're going to skip over that, and we're going to move right on into talking about the Genesis War. The Genesis War takes place immediately after the Wutai War, and that is where Crisis Core begins. Before we start talking about Crisis Core, though, there's something I want to address first. In Final Fantasy VII, there is a portion of the story where a town called Nibelheim burns to the ground. Yeah, that one. This is a very important event in the original game, and is the catalyst for the events that take place in Final Fantasy VII, and we'll talk about that more in depth later. The reason I bring this up is because Crisis Core also shows us the events of the Nibelheim disaster. However, there are differences between the two interpretations. Large differences that vastly alter how events should be looked at, as well as provide a better narrative for the progression of Sephiroth's character. So for the purposes of this video, if there are any inconsistencies between the two games, Crisis Core will be treated as the dominant source material. I'm not going to talk about Crisis Core in its entirety, because, quite frankly, a lot of the game has nothing to do with Sephiroth. But I do need to talk about Crisis Core, because it provides a bit of perspective on Sephiroth's character before he became
like a tortured, brooding, you know, like...
There's a lot of little tidbits I could point out to try and build a picture of what Sephiroth's character in Crisis Core is, and believe me, I tried. But in the grand scheme of things, that's exactly what they are. Tiny little tidbits that can't really be talked about exclusively without being turned into bullet points. At which point you might as well go watch one of the other half-dozen Sephiroth retrospective videos on YouTube. Basically, the only thing you really need to know about Sephiroth's involvement in Crisis Core is the realization that his humanity is directly linked to his friendships with the game's main characters, Genesis, Angeal, and to a lesser extent, Zack. Throughout the game, these friendships are brought up and even displayed to the audience, as we see Sephiroth bonding, laughing, even telling jokes and being lighthearted and supportive. Cause that's what you think of when you think of Sephiroth, right? No, of course not. You think of the legendary war hero. You think of the single most famous warrior on the planet. The loner with no history outside of his fame-worthy bloodlust. But that's not what we see here. What we see here is Sephiroth developing his relationships, his friendships with the main cast. But more importantly, we see those relationships fail. As I said earlier, there was an event called the Genesis War, and it's not a coincidence that it shares the same name with one of Sephiroth's friends. Genesis was also a soldier first class, however, shortly before Crisis Core, he defected and took many second and third class soldiers, as well as a bunch of Shinra equipment with him. He would then proceed to wage war on Shinra, hence the title, the Genesis War. During this war, Sephiroth would end up working with Zack, who also had a vested interest in the outcome because the character Angeal, who was also a soldier first class, had defected with Genesis as well. Angeal was Zack's mentor as he rose through the ranks of soldier and taught him much of how Shinra as a company works. These interactions between Zack and Sephiroth would lead to Zack becoming a friend of Sephiroth's, while also shedding light on Sephiroth's relationships with Genesis and Angeal. The first we really see of Sephiroth's friendship with Angeal and Genesis is this scene inside of the hologram training center. It starts out with some friendly back and forth banter between Sephiroth and Genesis, before the three friends begin violently sparring with each other, destroying anything in their path. It's a mutant thing, you wouldn't understand. Anyway, during the sparring, Genesis gets injured. He claims it's just a scratch, but as time goes on, the wound never heals. Upon going to Dr. Hollander, yet another Shinra scientist, Genesis learns he needs a blood transfusion for the wound to heal. Sephiroth, seeing his friend in trouble, immediately offers up his own blood for the transfusion, but is just as quickly told his blood is incompatible before being shut out of the doctor's office. So now we're just kind of left with Sephiroth trying to be a good friend to Genesis, but simultaneously being told he couldn't be just because he was different. And that's the basis of Sephiroth's entire character arc. You see, his whole life, all he's done is fight for other people, pushing their ideals forward. And in return, he gets treated as an outcast. A monster, even. And as his story continues, he doesn't change anything. He continues fighting for other people, pushing for their ideals, trying to protect them, trying to save them. And in the end, it all proves to have just been for nothing. You see, when Genesis defected from Shinra, Sephiroth was forced to just watch as all of his friendships fell apart before his eyes. I mean, his one friend disappeared out of the blue. His other friend, Angeal, also defected out of loyalty to Genesis. And then, after all of that, Sephiroth was forced to just watch from the sidelines as his newest friend, Zack, kills Angeal. And there's nothing he can do about it. And then 3 years pass. On the surface, Sephiroth seems the same. He's still stoic, doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve. Nothing's really changed in how he carries himself until we learn that him and Zack have been put on a mission to Nibelheim. And Zack receives a briefing for this mission before they go on it, obviously. And it sheds a bit of light on what exactly is going through Sephiroth's head these days.
Our orders are to investigate the reactor. They mention nothing of old friends. Depending on what happens, I may abandon Shinra. Until then, I'll remain loyal to Soldier.
That last sentence is the final trace of Sephiroth's humanity, because even he doesn't know what's going to happen. To him, Genesis is still his friend, and he knows this mission is going to come at odds with that. He knows this will likely end with him having to kill Genesis. His plan is to accept this fate, and then leave the life that gave him his fame behind. Then things got worse. Sephiroth, Zack, Cloud, and faceless Shinra Soldier all make their way to Nibelheim to check on a monster outbreak. Upon arriving, Sephiroth remarks that this is Cloud's hometown, which spurs a small conversation about his past.
So, how does it feel? To be home after all this time. I have no hometown. I wouldn't know.
What about family?
My mother's name is Jenova. She died shortly after I was born. My father... Why am I talking about this? Come on, let's go.
The crew makes their way to the Nibelheim Monko reactor, losing faceless Shinra Soldier along the way, which leads to the discovery of what can only be described as a monster creation hub. Dozens of men locked inside vat-like pods filled with Mako energy, an exposure far greater than that of the average soldier. But then the question arises, if Sephiroth is more than the average soldier, could he have been created like this? This is the realization that eventually busts through the crack that had formed from the turmoil that Sephiroth had been dealing with for the past 3 years. This leads to the reveal that would set the entire plot for Final Fantasy VII in motion. Genesis appears literally out of nowhere. He just descends from the fucking sky. What was he doing up there? Why did they not look up? Where was he hiding? Sorry. I just needed a reason to put JonTron in the tags for my video. So Genesis descends from nowhere and reveals the truth about his own and Sephiroth's origins.
The Jenova Project was the term used for all experiments relating to the use of Jenova's cells.
My mother's cells?
Jenova was excavated from a 2,000-year-old rock layer. She's a monster. Jenova Project S used the remains of countless failed experiments to create a perfect monster.
What do you want of me?
Your traits cannot be copied onto others. Your genes can't be diffused. Therefore, your body cannot degrade. Share your cells with me.
Whether your words are lies created to deceive me, or the truth that I have sought all my life, it makes no difference. You will rot.
That last line is arguably the most important line of dialogue Sephiroth has ever spoken. Across dozens of games and a movie and God knows what else, this line carries the most weight out of anything Sephiroth has ever said because this line signifies the moment Sephiroth threw away his humanity. Angeal is dead, his partner killed him, and Genesis is the reason all of this turmoil has turned up in Sephiroth's life. The friends who kept him human weren't friends at all, and Sephiroth has now made the choice to stop trying to be something he isn't, to stop being human. At that moment, Sephiroth became a monster. After this encounter, Sephiroth and Zack head back to town. Zack heads back to the hotel, but Sephiroth locks himself in the basement of Shinra Manor, the large estate in the center of Nibelheim, and the main hub for the original Jenova experiments by Professor Gast. He began reading about Jenova. He learns of the ancients and how Shinra was trying to create someone to find the promised land for them. All of the mystery about his life began to clear away. He knew what he needed to do. A week passes with no word from Sephiroth. Zack boredly kills time in the town, waiting for Sephiroth to return so they can head home. Then on the 7th day, Sephiroth burned down the entire village and then made his way to the Nibelheim reactor. When there, he breaks into the holding cell of Jenova so that he can finally meet his mother. Together, they would purge the world of the humans and take back the planet that was rightfully theirs as the last descendants of the ancients. This immediately leads into a confrontation with Zack, who loses pretty definitively. Sephiroth then returns his attention to Jenova before being brutally impaled by Cloud with Zack's Buster Sword. Sephiroth isn't finished yet, however, as he cuts off Jenova's head and tries to leave the reactor. When Cloud tries to stop him, he receives a stab wound through the chest for his efforts. Cloud, however, impales himself deeper on the sword to gain some leverage, taking advantage of the severely injured and arrogant Sephiroth, and uses the last bits of his strength to hurl Sephiroth off of the catwalk they were fighting on, sending him plummeting down into the Mako pool below, where his body disintegrates. So what exactly happened here? Well, it was a mixture of a couple things. First off, Sephiroth clearly went insane. Secondly, he also became filled with a lot of misinformation, which led to him believing he was the Messiah of the ancients, and that it was his duty to eradicate the planet of all humans and take back what was rightfully his. He came to this conclusion after locking himself up in the basement of Shinra Manor and reading up on Professor Gast's notes on the Jenova project. In these notes, Professor Gast states that Jenova was an ancient carved out of the northern crater. Upon reading this, Sephiroth began doing research on what the ancients were and what their history was, and as he took in all of this information, he slowly began to hate humans. Why was he the monster? Humans were the ones who eradicated the planet of his race. They were the ones who took everything from him. They were the monsters, and as such, he would kill every last one of them and become his own hero. But there was one little problem that Sephiroth didn't really take into account when he came up with this plan. Jenova wasn't an ancient. So before we get into Final Fantasy VII, I want to take a second to talk about Jenova more in depth, because up to this point I've been pretty vague about it. Simply put, Jenova is an alien. Not just any alien though. She is an alien that travels through space on random debris, meteors, space junk, whatever. 2,000 years prior to all of these events, her vessel crashed on Gaia, creating the northern crater. Now, at this time, the planet was inhabited by the Ancients, or as they were known at the time, the Cetra. The Cetra were a race whose duty was to protect the planet and to unlock the flow of the lifestream. In short, they were the reason life was capable of existing on the planet. They were also a relative of the human race, as humans were simply Cetra who had settled down, giving up their lifestyle of traveling and sowing the planet in favor of setting up community hubs and living a static lifestyle. When Jenova landed, however, she began performing her ideals: death. Jenova was a terrible creature, capable of transforming itself into any form. It would find members of the Cetra and inject them with her own DNA, turning them into horrific monsters. The Cetra would later refer to this simply as the virus. She would also take the form of people she had killed to get close to their friends and family and tear them apart from the inside. Jenova alone is the reason for the near and eventually complete extinction of the Cetra. Before she could completely wipe out the entire race, though, the few remaining survivors band together to seal the creature they would refer to as the Calamity from the Skies back in the northern crater, where she would sit lifeless for millennia until Shinra would dig her up to start the Jenova project. So you can obviously tell why this was all just a bad idea to begin with. But now that we have all of the story of how Sephiroth went insane out of the way, we can finally start talking about his motives in Final Fantasy VII, right? Well, not quite. To be able to talk about his motives and his endgame plan, we need to go a little more in depth with how the world works in the Final Fantasy VII universe. I mentioned the life stream briefly in my description of the Ancients, but what exactly is it? This scene with Bugenhagen actually describes it quite nicely, but it gets a little wordy, so I will try and cliff notes it for you. The lifestream connects all life. When one thing dies, its energy returns to the lifestream and is used to create new life. This is the cycle that governs existence on the planet. However, that isn't all it does. The lifestream also heals the planet. Should the planet be damaged in any way, it will call upon the energy of the lifestream to heal itself. That's where Sephiroth's plan comes into play. But wait! I hear you cry as a convenient distracting segue. Didn't Sephiroth die in Nibelheim? To which I would answer, sort of? Sephiroth's body was torn apart as he became one with the lifestream. Through sheer force of will, he retained himself and wrote it, learned from it. He learned of its purpose, and he learned of its connections to the Ancients that had long since been lost within it. It's unknown how long he drifted inside of the lifestream. However, the pieces of his body eventually wound up in the northern crater, the landing place of the Calamity from the Skies, the point on the planet with the highest concentration of the lifestream in an attempt to repair itself. But as it stood, he only had half a body, encased in Mako. It was at this point Sephiroth realized how much control he actually had. Through force of will, yet again, he was able to dominate Jenova's own being and control all of her cells as an extension of his own body. This includes anybody who had been injected with Jenova's cells. This creates the main plot for Final Fantasy VII. You see, the conceptual plot of Final Fantasy VII, when it was first being designed, was that you were, as a party, chasing the Man in Black across the world. Sometimes you actually see him, sometimes all you hear is rumors, but the chasing of the Man in Black is what drives you forward. The kicker here is that Sephiroth is not the Man in Black. The Man in Black is Jenova, whose form has been morphed into Sephiroth by Sephiroth from the Northern Crater. Obviously, this revelation has led to some people believing that Jenova is actually the final boss of the game, and she's just taken Sephiroth's likeness out of some weird connection. But that is incorrect. Sephiroth is the one in control, and this whole plan is his. Now that that's cleared up, Sephiroth has mobility and can traverse the world as he sees fit. So what is his plan? Well, Once he reached the northern crater, he came up with an idea. If there was this much energy from the damage that created the northern crater, then what if he made a bigger wound? One that threatened the life of the very planet itself. The amount of energy needed to repair something so huge would be astronomical. Then, at the center of that wound would be Sephiroth, and he would take all of that energy to make himself a god. But how would he cause enough damage to warrant that much energy? Well, as he explains in the Temple of the Ancients, he learned of something so powerful, the Ancients were forced to lock it away. Somewhere no one could ever find it. Inside of the Temple of the Ancients was the black materia, meteor. So, a quick digression for those at home who have been living under a rock for the past 20 years. What is materia? Well, materia is basically a bunch of rocks that you can place into special slots on your equipment. When placed, they activate a whole wide range of effects. Magic, commands, summons, even boosting your other materia. All these things become possible simply by equipping materia. So basically, the black materia is just a really powerful rock that is capable of summoning the Armageddon meteor to destroy the Earth. However, that isn't the end of Sephiroth's motives. Another underlying plot is Sephiroth's manipulation of Cloud throughout the game. We'll need to rewind here a little bit and go back to just after the events of Nibelheim. You see, after Sephiroth was defeated and thrown into the Mako reactor, Cloud and Zack weren't in the best of shape. So when Shinra showed up to clean up the mess and cover up the incident, Hojo silently took them and performed some tests on them as well as countless other individuals. Over the course of 4 years, he exposed them to massive amounts of Mako and also injected them with Sephiroth's own cells. This led to the two of them becoming even stronger than the standard Mako-infused soldier. However, this would also mean that Cloud possesses Jenova cells inside of his DNA, giving Sephiroth the ability to control him. While this proves useful to Sephiroth in regards to claiming the black materia, it would in actuality be his undoing. Rather than kill Cloud once his usefulness is up, Sephiroth simply leaves Cloud a broken shell and takes pride in his suffering. However, this arrogance would lead to Cloud eventually overcoming Sephiroth's and his own deceptions. Long story, I'll talk about that another day. And eventually defeating Sephiroth, stopping him from blocking Holy. What is Holy? Well, Holy is the materia in Aerith's headband. Aerith, at about the halfway point in the game, separates herself from the party to go off on her own adventure to try and activate Holy to stop Sephiroth from using the black materia to summon Meteor to destroy the planet. She knows how to do this because Aerith is in fact the last surviving ancient, and as an ancient, she is able to hear the other ancients in the lifestream and they tell her how to do it. This leads to Aerith being stabbed by Jenova and dying. With Aerith dead, Sephiroth is now able to block Holy, which is why the party needs to travel to the center of the northern crater to kill Sephiroth to stop him from blocking Holy so that Holy can stop the meteor from destroying the planet. After he is defeated, it looks as though Meteor is still gonna crash into the planet. Holy is taking too long to activate and it won't be able to stop Meteor in time. But just when everything seems lost, the lifestream emerges from the planet with the help of Aerith and holds Meteor back long enough for Holy to destroy it for good. However, when the lifestream emerges from the planet, Sephiroth infects it with his memories. Are you kidding me? His memories! He infected the lifeblood of an entire planet's existence with his memories. Fucking Japanese, man. Sephiroth infects the lifestream with his memories, creating a plague called the Geostigma virus, similar to what Jenova did with the Ancients. Which brings us to the conclusion of Sephiroth's plotline, Advent Children. Advent Children takes place 2 years after the conclusion of Final Fantasy VII. During this time, Sephiroth remained in the lifestream. As time went on, Sephiroth's memories of himself began to fade, even including his appearance. The only thing keeping him separated from the lifestream was his unbridled hatred of Cloud. By now, the Geostigma virus had run rampant over the world, infecting hundreds of children in the process. But Sephiroth knew he couldn't complete his goal simply by existing in the lifestream, so he created some puppets. Laz, Yazoo, and Kadaj. These are really stupid names. Are the personifications of Sephiroth's will, created by the memories of how other people within the lifestream viewed Sephiroth. Their goal is to find the head of Jenova to be reunited with their mother. Throughout the course of the film, they believe they are being guided by Jenova herself, unaware that Sephiroth intends to use the found Jenova cells to recreate a new body for himself. Of course, Kadaj eventually claims the head and merges with it. This allows Sephiroth to use the added Jenova cells to transform Kadaj into his own image, leading to the climactic showdown between Cloud and Sephiroth. It's at this point we learn Sephiroth's final plan. He will infect the world with geostigma, killing as many people as he possibly can so that the lifestream gets overrun by infected energy until he is able to control the lifestream itself. He then proceeds to wipe the floor with Cloud. We're talking complete decimation. From the get-go, Cloud is just slaughtered, torn apart piece by piece, forced to feel every ounce of agony Sephiroth has envisioned over the past 2 years. However, this would ultimately be Sephiroth's biggest mistake. His greatest weakness is the confidence he has in his own ability, as well as his hatred for Cloud. Rather than kill Cloud, he toys with him. He slowly tears Cloud apart simply to watch him suffer. This is what creates an opening for Cloud to launch a counterattack, besting Sephiroth once again and removing geostigma from the world. But before he goes, Sephiroth has one final thing to say.
I will never be a memory.
And that's the story arc of Sephiroth so far. A scientific experiment turned into a war hero before going insane after the loss of all his friends and the realization of his past, leading to him developing a god complex. That's at least a little cooler than a wuss pants with a hair product obsession and mommy issues, right? Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you are so inclined, even go as far as to check out our Patreon. It would really mean a lot to us. Don't forget to also check out some of these other great videos the channel has worked on in the past. All of our work needs attention, and the more attention it gets, the more help it is to us. And if you really liked this video and didn't quite get enough of a Sephiroth fix from it, please feel free to go and check out the death battle on Sephiroth and Virgil. I'll try and put it here. I don't know. I have little squares on my camera, and I want to put it here, but I don't know if YouTube will let me. We'll see. This is really just like a shameless plug to put Death Battle in the there we go. Death Battle in the tags. So, yeah, go check that out. Wow, working in the third dimension with only a two-dimensional scope of reference is difficult. Feel free to go check that out, and I think that is about all I really want to say in this ending portion of this video. So, yeah, ciao for now, roommates. Don't forget to close the door on your way out. Peace.